Year 4 under Brent Venables about to get underway. We heard from the head coach in Atlanta most recently, and now we hear from Parker Thune. We always appreciate Parker stopping by. It's On 3, it's Rivals, OU Insider, and of course, each and every day, KREF Sports, noon to 3 Central Time, folks. You can catch Parker right there talking Oklahoma athletics. Parker, appreciate you being here.
Yeah, always, Mark. Crazy to think it is year 4, and we've been doing these since the last year of the Lincoln Riley era, if I recall correctly.
We have been, absolutely. So let's start with the expectations of this football team, because I got to say, maybe I'm coming to the same conclusion as many that from the outset of this offseason, coming from where we were last season, and then knowing how daunting this schedule is, and again, I would hope at some point in the future the SEC would grind these schedules down a little bit more in an equitable way, because Oklahoma really got hit with it these 2 seasons to start, that there was a thought that, how can they keep up in the SEC, especially considering what we saw last year. But what we did see was a lot of people, including myself, once I did a deep dive on the personnel, despite the scheduling challenges, I'm coming out at 9-3 for this football team, and a lot of people are pretty optimistic.
I will say the general tenor at SEC Media Days in Atlanta last week was one of positivity for Oklahoma. And I think a lot of that has to do with the addition of John Mateer, certainly, and his offensive coordinator, Ben Arbuckle, but also just the stability that Oklahoma has on the defensive side of the ball. Bringing back 8 of 11 starters, and you do lose 3 good ones to the NFL, no doubt. Danny Stutzman, Billy Bowman, and Ethan Downs, but Oklahoma is going to have several players that are more than capable of stepping into those shoes and at least approximating the production that you got from those guys a season ago. Peyton Bowen, former 5-star recruit, he's going to step into Bowman's old role. Oklahoma brought in Florida State transfer Marvin Jones, himself a former 5-star recruit, to fill the void that Downs leaves behind. And then you have Kip Lewis, a guy that's been groomed alongside Danny Stutzman for the last 2 years, ready to step into that role as the heart and soul, the centerpiece of Oklahoma's defense. So there's certainly much to be excited about on that side of the football. You really are rolling the dice with this offense, though, and I think a lot of that is because you have no way of knowing how good Oklahoma actually was or had the potential to be in 2024, because that team was so crippled all year. So it looks so radically different personnel-wise from a year ago, and even that base that you feel like you would have something to go off in judging what lies ahead this year based on what happened last year, what that offense looked like last year, it still feels like such an inexact science trying to peg what Oklahoma is going to be offensively in 2025. But it's always nice therein to have the FBS's returning leader in total touchdowns and John Mateer at the center of it all. So, yeah, there's a lot of optimism regarding this football team and what they can be in the SEC this fall.
Yeah, absolutely. The uncertainty for any football team, that percentage has been raised considerably over the last few years, obviously, with the transfer portal. So, John Mateer, the statistics are jaw-dropping. So if that's the surface analysis for a lot of people, as soon as he showed up on the scene and was signed, okay, Oklahoma's got a capable quarterback. This guy can run and throw, 44 touchdowns. And then a lot of people, including myself, did at least that next layer to say, okay, power competition, not the best numbers, only a couple examples of that, but still, could there be concerns? Then there might be folks like you who did the next, or maybe about 8 more layers of deep dive in regards to watching the tape, understanding maybe some personnel deficiencies there around him, those sorts of things. So how much are those numbers skewed possibly, or maybe not as valid in terms of his performances a couple times out against upper tier competition?
Yeah, well, I mean, 44 touchdowns is 44 touchdowns, right? You account for that many touchdowns anywhere, you're a player. And so look, is John Mateer going to be a Heisman contender in 2025? I haven't touted him as such. I don't know that I would go that far, but I think it's reasonable to expect, right, that Mateer is going to have the type of year productively that can get Oklahoma to that 8-9, even 10 win threshold, because I think the reality of his situation at OU is that he's not going to have to do all of the things he did at Washington State a year ago to get that program to 8-4 in the regular season. If he accounts for 30 touchdowns in 2025, I think you're looking at an Oklahoma team that can hang with anybody in the SEC and that could be knocking on the door of a playoff berth. So there's not going to be as much that is demanded of Mateer in terms of output, in terms of production. And it'll be interesting to see whether he can live up to the billing. I'm not even really sure what that billing is. It might actually be higher nationally for Mateer than it is locally. And I think a lot of that is because so many Oklahoma fans are just a little hesitant, a little reticent to get their expectations too high after what happened in 2024. But John Mateer is a fantastic football player. He's tough. He's bulked up, 6'1", 225 pounds. So physically, he certainly looks the part. He's got the arm talent. He's got the creativity to his game. I worry a little bit about the low release point when he throws the football. That's something that Dylan Gabriel had to get adjusted to at Oklahoma when he came over from UCF in 22 and 23. You know, he's a shorter guy, and so he had to learn to create throwing angles or throwing lanes for himself, I should say, to avoid those bat downs at the line of scrimmage. So I'll be interested to see whether that's something that John Mateer struggles with in the early stages of the season for Oklahoma. But there's no reason why this guy, especially given the familiarity with Ben Arbuckle's system that he brings to the table, shouldn't be a capable trigger man in an Oklahoma offense that should be vastly improved from where they were a year ago.
Parker, when I threw out the possibility of 9 wins, you know, that type of tier team, especially considering the schedule, unless they really stumble against some teams and lose by 5 touchdowns, you know, they would have the strongest resume possibly in the country for a 9-3 team. But when you think about teams that are that good, top 10 teams, and again, a lot of national publications have them on the fringe of the top 10 to 15 range. You know, there are usually, let's say, waves of running backs. You know, Jaden Ott, is there being maybe too much being put on him that he needs to carry the mail, or do you see some supplement there?
Yeah, Oklahoma's got a deep running back room. Xavier Robinson was a guy that really came on strong tail end of last season. He's going into his sophomore year. Taylor Tatum, the former #1 running back prospect in the country that Oklahoma signed in the 2024 class. He's incredibly talented. Got to work on ball security, got to work on pass protection, but there's a lot that he brings to the table. And then Javante Barnes, rising senior, who hasn't been 100% healthy, hasn't been himself since really his true freshman year in 2022. He should be back up to speed. He should be himself again this fall, which should provide Oklahoma a nice complement to Ott. But I think everybody understands it's going to be the Ott show. There's a reason why Oklahoma general manager Jim Nagy, upon taking the job this past spring, made the acquisition of Ott one of his very first priorities, because he saw Ott, and I'm using his verbiage here, saw him as a game breaker, saw him as somebody that could come in and legitimately help change Oklahoma on the offensive side of the ball. And running back didn't even look or feel like a legit need for Oklahoma in the spring portal window, but that's how highly Nagy thought of Ott. He thought, you know what, we go get this guy from the University of California. He can help take our offense to another level, and he's worth the investment to do so. So expectations are very high for Ott. I would say, barring injury, if he doesn't go for 1,000 yards, it's going to feel like a bit of a disappointment. The bigger question to me is who emerges as RB2, who becomes the primary handcuff to Ott at Oklahoma. Is it Barnes as a senior? Might it be Xavier Robinson? Could it be Taylor Tatum, who I would say almost inarguably has the highest ceiling of the three, but also the lowest floor? So interesting committee there in the Sooners backfield.
We got Parker Thune on the line. Of course, it's KREF Sports Monday through Friday, noon Central, and then catch him on 3 and Rivals. It's OU Insider with Parker. Of course, nothing could touch the disaster that was the wide receiver room last year because of injury, first and foremost. I would have expected, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm, again, gonna fly off the top of my forethoughts on doing an OU preview maybe 3 weeks ago, and the names that I've since forgotten possibly. But I think of Auburn going out and getting an Eric Singleton from Georgia Tech, a guy that's a known commodity. And the wide receivers have to be better. And I know Deion Burks is counted upon, but it didn't seem like OU went out and got a guy that we can necessarily count on.
I'll tell you, they love the guys that they went out and got at wide receiver. Giovanni Gibson, the Arkansas Pine Bluff transfer. They felt at the time that was a guy that had really flown under the radar nationally and probably didn't have the type of attention that he warranted when he got in the transfer portal. He was probably Oklahoma's best receiver in the spring up until he suffered a foot injury that required surgery and has kept him on the shelf ever since the month of April. So assuming he's back to full speed, and he should be by week 3 or 4 at the absolute latest, that's a guy that Oklahoma expects is going to play a major role in the offense. Another guy, and I'm as culpable as anybody in this, Mark, I probably did not talk up this guy as much as I probably should, but he has really made waves throughout the offseason and just steadily continued to impress and turn more and more and more heads, is Isaiah Satania, the redshirt junior slot wideout, formerly of Arkansas. And this is a guy that had some pretty solid production for the Razorbacks a year ago in what was a less than stellar offensive situation. And by all accounts, he and John Mateer have developed a really solid chemistry. He's going to presumably start in that slot for Oklahoma. And the last time Oklahoma had a slot receiver that was taking the lion's share of the snaps and was as good as Satania is, well, that was Drake Stoops in 2023, and he finished that campaign with 84 catches for 962 yards. So the opportunity for production is going to be there for Satania, and he's also just a supreme athlete, electric with the football in his hands. He's going to contribute in the return game as well. And then another guy worth mentioning that just got in at the tail end of the spring, he was a transfer in the post-spring window, is McNeese transfer Jermichael Carter. Again, another FCS guy, so maybe going to register nationally as somebody that, his arrival at Oklahoma is regarded as seismic. But they love him, love his length. He's about 6'4", 190 pounds. Incredibly athletic dude and a very hard worker by all accounts. So that's somebody that I would expect is going to play a role for Oklahoma as well. But your 3 starting wideouts, assuming they are healthy at the start of the season, my belief would be it's Deion Burks, it's Giovanni Gibson, and it's Isaiah Satania.
And Parker, it's funny because as I go through every team, and I've made it through about 40 teams across the country, OU wide receivers keep popping up, like Khalil Farouk somewhere, and Andrew Anthony somewhere, and Nick Anderson somewhere. And I keep thinking, why didn't these guys hang around, considering the dearth there at Oklahoma? But you thought they would have stuck around. But let's look at offensive line. We want to be able to run through the offensive line and defense before we let you go. And so, man, I don't know. Take any college football analyst or fan and drop them anywhere in any situation across the country, and the number one concern of most teams going into a season is, do we have enough capable offensive linemen to make this whole thing go on offense?
Yeah, and the Sooners do, Mark, I'll tell you that much. So they have Jacob Sexton returning to play left tackle. They brought in Western Carolina transfer Derek Simmons, a very experienced player, to play the right tackle position. Right guard Fabechi Wiwu is going to reprise his starting role. He was kind of the lone constant for Oklahoma up front in what was such a tumultuous year for that unit in 2024 with the injuries they went through. Center is going to be an interesting battle between redshirt senior Troy Everett, who has been a 2-year starter for Oklahoma, and Jake Michaela, the Stanford transfer, whom many in the building are very, very high on. And then maybe the most unsettled spot is left guard. And I say unsettled because it's not clear who the starter is going to be. The Sooners have numerous very solid options that they could plug in there at left guard, starting with Eddie Pierre-Louis, rising sophomore, former blue chip recruit out of Orlando, Florida, incredible athlete, and they like him a lot. The incumbent at the position is redshirt sophomore Heath Ozida, who drew 7, maybe 8 starts for Oklahoma at left guard last year and did pretty admirable work, all things considered. Also in the picture, you have Daniel Akinkunmi, an international signee for Oklahoma back in the 2024 class, redshirt freshman, originally from England. And then it's not out of the question you could see a veteran deployed at that position, like Michaela, for instance. He doesn't have to play center. He's played both guard spots during his collegiate career at Stanford previously. But also Jake Taylor, redshirt junior, and a guy who played a lot of right tackle for Oklahoma last season. He's somebody that can play pretty much anywhere on the offensive line. And could there maybe be a fit for him at left guard with the knowledge that those 2 tackle spots between Sexton and Simmons are probably accounted for? It'll be interesting. The Sooners also have a couple of true freshmen that they absolutely love and that were very highly regarded on the recruiting trail. 5-star signee Michael Fasusi out of Lewisville, Texas, and high 4-star signee Ryan Foje out of Bridgeland, Texas. So those 2 guys have been excellent since showing up. I'm always hesitant to project that a true freshman, especially on the offensive line, sees the field from the jump. But those 2, if Oklahoma has reason to call their numbers, I think they're going to be ready. So depth on the offensive line for Oklahoma much stronger than it was a year ago.
Yeah, must be a lot of names up front that you ran through. Anytime anyone would challenge me with, the type of season that Oklahoma had in 2024, and it was usually from a national perspective, they just were awful, they sucked. Of course, I'd come back with the defense because people didn't pay attention and really focus that this was one of the maybe 10 best defenses in the country last year. So does that seem to be an attainable standard despite the losses of the production at the top of the tackle charts and so forth?
Well, certainly. I think the national perspective right now, if you were to poll the majority of national pundits and experts on who has the best defensive line in the SEC, at least on paper, Oklahoma seems to be the popular choice right now. You look at that linebacker group. I mentioned Kip Lewis. Oklahoma brought in Oklahoma State transfer Kendall Daniels, another outstanding football player with a ton of experience to help solidify that position. You have Sammy Omasigo in the mix, a rising junior that has seen the field in various capacities for Oklahoma over his first 2 seasons on campus and is somebody that I'm very, very high on. Think he could take a quantum leap. Kobe McKenzie, a redshirt junior who's seen action for Oklahoma as more or less a second teamer at linebacker. He hasn't started yet, at least not for any substantial length of time, but he's somebody that played good football at times last year, is especially outstanding in run support, and is somebody that is going to give Oklahoma help at that position. In the secondary, you're going to have 2 studs at safety and Peyton Bowen and Robert Spears-Jennings. Their backups, Michael Boganowski and Jaden Hardy, are also excellent players. Kendall Dolby back at Cheetah after sustaining a dislocated ankle that cost him the majority of last season, but he has blown the rehab out of the water per everyone I've talked to. So expectations are high for him. The one question mark is maybe cornerback, and the Sooners do have 2 really solid, really capable starters, 2 guys that have played high-level football when healthy in Gentry Williams and Eli Bowen, but both of them have battled injuries more so than you would have liked them to this point in their collegiate careers. So it's a question of whether you're going to have those guys healthy and available for all 12, 13, 14 games, whatever it winds up being. And then behind them, who emerges? True freshman Cortland Guillory has earned a lot of buzz. Redshirt freshman Jeremiah Newcomb, Bobby Newcomb's son, has done some great things this offseason. Davon Jordan, a sophomore, saw some run last year as a true freshman and played well. And then Jacoby Johnson, maybe the best athlete of the group as a rising junior. Not a natural corner, played a lot more wide receiver in high school, but somebody that he's one of those dudes, whatever you ask him to do on a football field, he's going to be capable of holding his own. So cornerback is the one position group on that defense where I feel like we know the least about what it looks like, at least beyond those 2 admittedly injury-plagued starters to this point. But the defense as a whole, Mark, there's no reason why they shouldn't verge on being a top 10 unit in the country.
So it sounds like you answered my next question right at the tail end there with cornerback, because while it doesn't appear as though there's some kind of fire drill going on, trying to figure out what are we going to do over the next month to fix this spot or that position or hide him, cornerback might be the biggest focus in terms of sorting things out.
Yeah, it might be. And obviously, if Gentry Williams and Eli Bowen don't get hurt, that's actually one of the best cornerback pairs in the SEC. That's one of the best tandems you're going to find in the conference. Both of them have played incredible football at times during their careers at Oklahoma when they have been healthy and available. You go back to the OU Alabama game last year. How many guys last season, Mark, managed to lock down Ryan Williams for a full 60 minutes? Eli Bowen, as a true freshman, did that. Eli Bowen limited Ryan Williams to 2 catches last year when Alabama came to Owen Field. So the talent is there, and I do think Cortland Guillory does have the potential, if the opportunities are there, to be one of the more impactful freshmen in the conference this fall. But it's not a question of whether the talent is there. It's just kind of a question of who is capable beyond those 2 projected starters of really taking the leap and helping solidify that group for Oklahoma.
Parker, before we let you go, in terms of your own approach to covering college football, I know that the business moves so fast. You were probably, on the ground running after 2 weeks after Oklahoma was, announced to the SEC, or at least playing in the SEC. So it's been a full year plus, but still, what's it been for you to be focused this direction, then to do one of these in regards to opponents, other teams, just the whole vibe of the SEC and the way it's structured and the prominence and everything involved?
I love covering football in the SEC, Mark. They say it just means more, and it truly does. And, I think when you go somewhere like, for instance, and Auburn, Alabama last fall, that was an eye-opening road trip to me. SEC football is different. It feels like Oklahoma belongs in this conference a little bit more than they belong in the Big 12, which I would not have imagined saying at the time when the transition was announced, because it felt weird that Oklahoma was all of a sudden going to be playing SEC ball. But no, it fits. It's a league that's football first, football forward. And you go to any of these venues across the conference, and I'm really excited to go to some of them for the first time this fall, including South Carolina, which is a trip that everybody that's done it has told me it's going to exceed your expectations and then some. Man, you can't go anywhere in the SEC without escaping the aura of everything that the conference is in the sport of football. So it's been really cool.
Parker Thune, KREF Sports, every day, weekdays. That's noon Central Time. And then, of course, catch his work on OU Insider. That's Rivals and On3. Parker, always appreciate you breaking things down for us and being here for us, and enjoy August camp.
No problem. Appreciate you, Mark. We'll do it again.